Gravity is cringe. It's downright repulsive. It's so repulsive, in fact, that I'm going to attempt to beat Cuphead upside down. Because who even needs gravity? I'm also going to be doing it lobber only, and with no supers. This video was simultaneously the hardest and easiest challenge ever, with some of the bosses being downright too easy, and some of them being I want to smash my head in. But not to spoil anything, I'm going to make plain levels equally devastating. Without further ado, let's begin. We start off this challenge like any other, making a save file. Once we do that, we also go talk to Elder Kettle. I'm not going to be upside down for the portions inside his house because I have no idea. Side note, if you want to know what this challenge is like for me at some portions, pick up your nearest electronic device and slam it into the wall. Then we moved on to the tutorial, which surprisingly started off really well. I didn't think I could make that little jump there, but I ended up making it. Sweet. At this point, I was thinking it was going to be one of the few times during a Cuphead challenge that I could actually beat the tutorial. And that held true until I got to the exit. As you can see, your Cuphead is literally annoyingly short. And he also can't jump very high, which doesn't really help his case either. Accepting my failure. Still annoyed about that, by the way. I moved outside to go collect the 3 coins and do my first run and gun. I've always questioned, why does Cuphead feel the need to go murder a bunch of people? Because I get the soul contract things. You know, I get those, but like, run and guns, that's really just Cuphead going out and massacring the town. I guess a plus here is that they can't really do anything to me and I can easily get all the coins. I still have to be careful of all the projectiles and especially acorns. I have another question now. Why do these, like, plant jumper things have teeth? And why do they have 2 sets of them? Nearly missed that coin there. Finishing that out, it was time to get all of the weapons necessary, which would be 1 weapon, because I'm only allowed to use lobber. After purchasing some firearms at my nearest Walmart, it was time to go murder some children. Specifically 3 children. 3 oversized, overgrown, ugly children. Oh, and you might have just noticed there, but there's actually a health bar up there. That's for your convenience, not for mine, trust me. It is notable to mention here, this is the first time I can ever actually say the root pack was decently hard. Hard or not, I still got it though. That sounded weird. Don't quote me on that. Next up, Ruby and Croaks. A pretty easy boss compared to the rest. All I really did here was shoot them and try not to get hit by the bees, which was pretty easy actually. Funnily enough here, the second phase was actually just the normal second phase because the attacks work both up and down. As expected, the final phase was really easy. See kids, this is why you don't gamble, or some anti-gravity defying cup will come and murder you. What does that even mean? Another surprisingly hard boss here, Goobly or Gran. This time it was hard because he can jump pretty high and usually he'd run into me, so not very fun. That was really only for his second phase though. Other than that, he was pretty easy. His third phase was way too easy. He literally couldn't even hit me. I then decided to go get Miss Chalice from the DLC island by murdering a bunch of ghosts. All jokes aside, this was actually pretty hard, taking multiple attempts to actually finish. This is also a good time to mention that Mauseums actually aren't required because I'm not even allowed to do super, so that's basically pointless, but run and guns are required. Now it's time to move on to the second run and gun, just to get it knocked out. Before you finish this video, comment what you think the 3 hardest bosses would be for this challenge, and then at the end of the video, see if you were right. I mean, I have no way of seeing if you didn't lie, but I don't really care, have fun with it. All in all, this run and gun was really easy, time to move on to Cagney Carnation. I think this is an appropriate time to mention, this isn't actually my first time editing this part of the video. From here to the entirety of Inkwell 1, I already had recorded and edited this part, but since my Adobe crashed, I lost all that editing, so from here till Inkwell 2 is finished, everything is going to be re-edited, so if it seems like less enthusiastic, you know why. Oh, and before we go back to the main video, I'd also like to say that majority of Inkwell 1 was just re-recorded because the challenge at first wasn't actually lobber only, but it became lobber only later on, so then I had to re-record it. It's confusing. Now we're going to move on to the first truly hard boss. Hildeberg was kind of like a punch in the face. Up until this point, I thought everything was going to be pretty easy, but that was before I did any plane levels, because if you're unaware, for plane levels, I just completely remove the plane, then go upside down. Also, quick question here. When did Cuphead go from, just frolicking around in his backyard to literally murdering women on unicycles and attacking sheep? I guess that's why you don't gamble. All jokes aside, it took me like an hour-ish to beat this boss, but it wasn't terrible, it just wasn't fun. The first 3 phases were easy. The only hard part was the final phase, because I had to dodge UFOs and shoot it at the same time, which is easier said than done. I ended up just dodging all the UFOs, then once they were done, I just shot her. It was pretty monotonous, but I got it eventually. Anyway, we're gonna move on to the next equalizer. First up, a woman made of pure diabetes. I mean, sugar. But for real, how is this healthy? Like, really, how is she not, like, bedridden at this point? But I couldn't kill this woman just yet. I had to kill her cronies first. Infamous criminals as they were, the Muffin Man, a weird candy corn thing, and a jawbreaker. Truly the most hardened criminals of the bunch. All jokes aside, this boss was pretty easy, which is in stark contrast to when I tried beating this game lobber only while I wasn't upside down, so that was a scrapped video idea. It wasn't scrapped because it was too hard or anything, I just kind of got bored of it and decided to scrap it. But I brought it back with a twist. Cuphead Upside-down, lobber only. From this point on, it didn't take too long to beat up this sugar addict. And before I knew it, I was moving on to Beppy the Clown. Beppy the Clown was pretty easy, you know. It only took me like 2-ish attempts, but yeah. I find it kind of funny how Cuphead went from a normal citizen, this is assuming you don't count the Netflix show because he is not a normal citizen, he is a hardened criminal. Go watch that, it's actually really nice. To straight up just beating up people and stealing their soul for soul contracts. Not even like 5 minutes after he got his own soul taken. No hesitation at all. As I said, it didn't take too long to beat Beppy the Clown, so before I knew it, I was moving on to my next boss. Editor note here, I actually meant run and gun, but I'm far too lazy to go back and change it, so yeah. You may or may not have just noticed that I'm on the floor now. And before you go commenting, you failed the challenge, you failed the challenge. Just keep in mind that, hey, this is the only level where you can actually legitimately go upside down. So, I'm going to allow myself to go on the floor yourself, because why not? If you think I failed the challenge here, I guess feel free to dislike. I don't really care all that much. Also, again, where is the police? Cuphead is just going around murdering more and more people. I said this for the first run and gun, and I'll say it again. He's just going out and just murdering people. Like, soul contracts, I guess, yeah, they're debtors, but, like, these are not debtors. These are just people. Or musical instruments. Like, are all the cops in the county on lunch break? Now we're gonna move on to a boss I thought was gonna be hard, but really was pretty easy. Grim Matchstick. For the first phase here, I literally just dodged their little eyeball attacks. He's kind of stupid, so he doesn't know how to aim. Second phase was more the same, except I didn't really have to do anything, because I could just crouch and shoot. It was pretty fun. The final phase was literally the exact same. Nothing changed here. Also, side note, but wouldn't it be kind of sad to live with 3 heads? Because assuming these heads all had brains and could think for themselves, you have to live with 3 different people. And I don't know if you've ever tried to get 3 people to agree on one thing, but it's not gonna happen. So yeah, I don't know how they do this. Now moving on to the Jimmy the Great. Oh, did I think Hildeberg was hard? Boy, was I in for a surprise. This boss was like annoyingly hard. It took me like 3 hours to do this one, like triple the time it took me to do Hildeberg, so yeah. For the first phase, I had to just keep retrying until I got the sword attack, because the other ones were just too hard and too inconsistent. All in all, the first and second phase didn't give me too much trouble after a good amount of attempts. Moving on to the third phase here, I immediately go to the top right hand corner. This is so I get a good angle on the boss without having to like actually do any work to do damage. And if you're wondering why I didn't just do that one plain strategy where you stand in front of it at the very top of the screen, it's because, well, I can't shoot the boss and dodge the, like, ghost thing at the same time. It just doesn't work. For this phase, I had to bait the hat into going into this area, otherwise it would follow me over to my next part of my plan. The next part of my plan, as you can clearly see, is just the same as the third phase. Just shoot it from behind where it can't do anything to you. Like a fetile child, as long as you go behind it and hit it over the head, it can't attack back. Moving on to the final phase here, this was a pretty hard phase because I had to dodge the pyramid beam things and his little eyeball beam attack thing. But just like every other attack in this game, there is always a counter called a dash roll. A pretty overpowered roll. So yeah, after 3 hours I eventually did beat this little gremlin, and now it was time to move on to the next run and gun. Just like the first run and gun, it was pretty easy. Nothing notable really happened that stood out, so I'm just gonna skip past this one. So we're gonna move on to Wally Warbles, and if I thought Jimmy the Great was hard, I didn't know the half of it. This boss probably took me around 6 hours, so double the time it took me to do Jimmy the Great. Perfect. And I'm not just saying that, I was legitimately stuck on this boss for a long time. For the first and second phase, I followed the strategy of ducking down the top left-hand corner and shooting him, hoping I don't get annihilated by some feathers in the second phase. It didn't really help that my strategy was basically relying on not having any human error, which was, why it wasn't a very good strategy. The second phase alone was legitimately the hardest part of this boss. And that was because on average, after like a few minutes or so, I just get like normal damage because, you know, human error and everything. But the problem with this boss is there was no reliant way of doing damage consistently. Like I could do damage, but then I have to wait a little bit before I can do more damage. And this meant this phase took a long time, which allowed human error to like basically ruin all my runs. As you can see here, my strategy really was just rolling back and forth and shooting up and up left and up right just to like maybe hit it. It was kind of confusing, so I'm just gonna move on to the final phase. This phase, which should have been the easiest phase, I actually died to a number of occasions just because, I don't know, maybe I was nervous because it takes so long to get to this phase or anything. But I was making pretty trivial mistakes that usually I wouldn't make, so it was kind of just mostly annoying, really. But just like any other boss, no matter how annoying it is, you eventually get it. Now it's time to move on to the third Equalizer. Starting off with Rumor Honeybottoms, a surprisingly easy boss while upside down, which the same cannot be said for my friend Skycake, who literally took 50 plus attempts at beating it normally.
Yeah, Rumor Honeybottoms was not the easiest boss in the world, you know, it only took me a little over 100 attempts. Don't worry about it.
Who let you in the recording? You know what, never mind, just continue on with the challenge. Anyway, wrapping up Rumor Honeybottoms with the last phase, it was surprisingly easy because all I had to do was shoot up and then it would just come back down and hit her in the face. Now we're going to be moving on to Captain Brinybeard, a name which I learned from a YouTube comment. Funnily enough, his first phase was somewhat the same except for the fact that his barrel couldn't even hit me, which was kind of weird. I assumed that it would be able to, but as long as you're ducking down, it can't. The only annoying attack he would do is when he summoned the squid and covered up half my screen because I'm literally just running into all the particles because there is nowhere to go. It also didn't help that he did it time after time. Now we're going to move on to the final phase, which is really just me sitting at the top of the screen shooting down on him. There is no challenge here. None of his projectiles can actually hit me. Now we're going to move on to Perilous Spheres, another level that I thought would be hard, but really only took me like 3 attempts. Which is why I'm going to skip over it. There is literally no challenge here. I just stay at the top of the screen and don't even have to worry about literally anything. It is that easy. I swear, some of these levels are really hard and some of them are really easy. And then some of them, I guess, are a little bit in between, but there's like only 3 of those kinds of levels. Now we're going to move on to the sewer rat thing. I recently saw a theory that this rat wasn't even actually German because if you look at some of their war memorabilia, it's actually conflicting from different sides of the battle, which I guess is kind of interesting. And this is kind of further proven by the fact that in the Cuphead show on Netflix, at the end of his episode that he's in, he kind of switches to an American accent, so that's nice. Again, if you haven't watched the Cuphead show, it's on Netflix. It's a complete treat to watch. It's actually really good, so go give it a try. All in all, this little Sue rat here actually wasn't really that hard, so we're going to move on to the final phase, which I'm only going to cover for like 5 seconds. This phase is really more the same. I just shot a cat for like 30 seconds. It wasn't much. Now we're going to move on to Kahl. Oh, did I think Wally Warbles was hard? Well, I'm actually completely right. It was a lot harder than this. This was actually super easy. Yeah, no, this actually only took me like a few attempts. It really wasn't hard, which is actually really surprising because every single air fight up to this point was super hard. Then out of the blue, this one was just really easy, so good for me. Also, for whatever reason, if you're not in a plane during this phase, she literally can't turn you into stone. Like, it just wouldn't happen. So I guess that does make sense because you're not supposed to not be in a plane here, so yeah. And for the final phase, it kind of just put me in this one area up here where I couldn't really get hit by much except for if the little green skulls got adventurous, but yeah, there wasn't really much that could actually do anything to me, so it was really easy. Finishing out Kahl, it was time to move on to Sally stage play. Interestingly enough, this boss was actually pretty hard, even upside down, which is kind of a shocker because all the normal missions were pretty easy up till this point. The only real reason this fight was hard was because when she would drop down on you, it was kind of unpredictable if she would land on you, and it kind of did a lot of damage to me given that my movement was definitely restricted, being that I was actually upside down. This phase was really just dodging a bunch of wind-up rats. Also, where does she get these? Who just has these on hand? The third phase was pretty easy. My strategy was just to do a bunch of damage before she could do a hard attack like lightning, which was kind of hard to dodge upside down. And the final phase was too easy. There's not much to say here. It was quite literally just easy. Now we have to murder a giant robot. This boss right here was the single hardest boss in this challenge. It took me so much time, so much effort, and so many attempts just to beat it. It honestly felt like if you were playing this one normally with no experience and it was always your first attempt when you tried. This boss really did just come down to learning each phase as you do it, trial and error, find a way to beat it, and boom. Except for the third phase, that was just completely human error based. As you can see for the first phase, I just got above him and shot upwards, so it came back and hit him. It was pretty hard to figure this trick out, but once I did, it became really easy. The second phase was equally hard as the first phase until I figured out that all I had to do was set a bunch of lobber traps and boom, easy. Now the third phase. This phase didn't even have a strategy. Well, okay, there was a strategy to it, but that strategy only worked if you made 0 human errors. And oh my god, I made so many errors, and this is why it took me so long. First off, I had to dodge all of his little energy pellets, and this would require a combination of jumping, dodging, and all that stuff. And then I had to make sure not to run into any of his electric walls by dashing through them, which I didn't know was possible until I tried it, so nifty. All in all, this boss was really hard, and it took me so many attempts, but as always, I eventually got it. These next few bosses are going to be speeded up a bit, because they're pretty easy. Now we're on to the Phantom Express, which was kind of cool, because the pumpkins couldn't even do anything to me, and all I had to do was shoot. I know, shocker. This second phase was kind of annoying, because it was kind of hard to shoot the skeleton face without getting hit, but, you know, it wasn't too hard, I guess. The next phase was pretty easy, the little meatball-looking things. I actually don't really know what these are. I just call them meatballs, because that's what I assume they are. Actually, I guess now looking at them right now, they don't look like meatballs, but I don't care. I'm still going to call them a meatball. Fun fact, at the end of the phase here, I actually ended up dying, but somehow killing him at the end, so even though Cuphead ended up dying, I still won. So that was cool. Anyway, time to move on to King Dice. I really didn't know what to expect from King Dice, but really, he was pretty easy. It took me like a few attempts, but as always, I eventually got him. And now, just editing this, I realize I say, but as always, a lot. First phase here, I tried for a 3 and just kept resetting if I didn't get a 3, and yeah, it was really easy. I quite literally just shot. There was nothing to dodge, so gonna move on. Next phase was little bunny rabbit man. The dash roll is pretty overpowered. It basically made this boss super easy. Also, why do I get the idea that this rabbit is completely and utterly high out of his mind? Just like, look at his face for like a solid 30 seconds and tell me he isn't high. Next up, we went head to head against gambling. The main problem was this entire challenge. Like, seriously, Cuphead, all you had to do was not gamble and you wouldn't have to go massacre the town. Or I guess just have some morals. Anyway, she was pretty easy. We're gonna move on to the next phase. I ended up doing the 8-ball just to make sure that I didn't have to fight number 9. The little monkey thing, because it's actually pretty hard. Anyway, we're gonna skip on to the final phase. This phase was unsurprisingly very easy. Nothing could actually hit me, so I just shot him. Yeah, pretty easy. Now we're gonna move on to the devil, the final boss. Also, fun fact there, I don't know if you noticed there, but the little astral spirit version of Cuphead was scared of the devil. That's some nice attention to detail. The first phase of the devil was pretty easy. There was like only a few attacks that actually kinda sucked, but really they're not that notable. Small problem, at the end of this phase you have to fall through a little tiny hole in the floor. That requires gravity. Anyway, I just kinda let myself use gravity because I don't care. Again, if you think I failed, well then feel free to leave a dislike, I guess. I even got stuck above the screen temporarily, but I did the same thing to get myself unstuck. And as soon as I got unstuck, I got literally bombed. Nice. Anyway, earlier I was talking about how I had my top 3 hardest bosses, so here they are. The first one, Dr. Kahl's robot. The second one, Wally Warbles. And the third one, Jimmy the Great, which was probably pretty obvious. All in all, this challenge was actually really fun, and none of the bosses really annoyed me that much, except for playing levels. I will never be able to look at them the same. All in all, the devil himself was a pretty easy foe to defeat. Now, I'm not going to be going into the DLC because I just don't think that would be very interesting, and I don't think you guys would even want to see that, so there's no possible way I would ever consider doing it. Well, I'm all done editing. That was pretty interesting, I guess. It took me like 4 attempts to finish this because it crashed like 3 times, so I eventually got it. Wait. Why do I still have videos left over? Wait a minute, is that the...